So on the type of companies themselves, I'll give you an example of one that's not announced yet, but we've invested in a company that is helping people in rural and middle America acquire middle skills, but using like very advanced VR training. So to your question on like software eating the world, like you can use very advanced technology to do some of these kind of focus on these markets that we believe are really large but underserved. Another example that you mentioned, or you were just chatting around the coaching piece, like Bridget had done really early investments in a company called BetterUp, which is using technology to scale access to coaching to Fortune 500 companies, so that a much broader range of the workforce can get access. Mm-hmm. So it's like, again, it's in that market. For us, it's in our thesis too. Mm-hmm. In terms of people starting to talk about coaching and things, so there are, to your point, funds that, like Felicis is, for an example, there are some that provide access to coaches. I don't know how prevalent it actually is versus just what people are talking about. Like, I don't know if people are putting resources behind the extent to which people are putting resources behind portfolio services that are encouraging this, and how much it plays into the way that they actually interact with their CEOs.
Gotcha.
And their founders. Mm-hmm. So to your point, there certainly is more emphasis, I would say, on coaching and like mental health and other aspects of helping founders succeed. Mm-hmm. There's also another stat I think I've mentioned to you before, that it's something like, I think it's the Founder's Dilemma, 65% of startup failures are related to HR issues. These businesses are fundamentally people businesses, even if it's very, tech heavy or tech oriented. The product, it's still a group of people doing this. Mm-hmm. So, we specifically focus on this as part of our fund. I'm super happy to see that other funds are starting to think about this, so it becomes part of the norm of how people operate here. I would say, to my knowledge, it is more limited and actually putting it into practice in your own firm and how you actually support founders. Again, that's just to my knowledge. I think your last piece of the question was around diversity. Mm-hmm. So the way that we think about it, well, one, is embedded in how we look at like due diligence. So we're thinking about, there's research that suggests that having more diverse teams produces better financial outcomes for companies. There's research also suggests that having more diverse venture teams, you have different kind of investment choices that are made. When I was my first venture fund I worked at, I was the only woman who worked there. And so you do see certain types of like decision-making processes and cultures that can develop over time. What I would say is, so from the diligence side, it's part of the way that we're assessing a company and talking to the firm around, what is the composition of their team, not just from a, gender perspective, but also what roles are people playing? How are they developing a culture that supports a diverse and inclusive environment? Mm-hmm. From our side, like, as I mentioned, we have advisors who advise specifically on culture. We've invested in companies specifically around DE&I. So it's something that runs through our firm, again, both from a market, from how we support founders, and then how we operate a firm. I think that's one of the themes you'll hear, is it kind of permeates across those three.
Gotcha. Got it.
Did I get all parts of your question? I wasn't sure if I.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just my flow of thought. Thank you for that. And speaking of that, I know, like, when your website, it seems like you have, I know it's a new venture, but it seems like you have already made quite a few investment. You have a portfolio there already. So would you like to share with us maybe some of your, like, I know you can't name like one favorite, maybe a few. Some of the things you think it's worth mentioning of your investments?
Sure, I can name a couple. So we've done 10 investments to date. I believe 9 of those are announced. So the most recent one is not publicly announced yet. So, but it's a Series A that we led, a $12 million round. in helping to scale this middle skills training I was mentioning that's using VR. It's highly efficacious. 60% of students using the product are African American. It's primarily in Alabama, Texas, and California. So very rural and middle America focused. California's in the rural parts of California. So really exciting to bring training that allows folks to get into really high paying jobs without college degrees. So those jobs can start at $70,000 to $100,000. Lots of career advancement. That's everything from manufacturing to green tech, healthcare, things like that. More on that one when it comes out. So that's one part of the kind of spectrum. When you talk about middle skills, it's post high school, below college. Another investment that we've led was the kind of a super seed, I call it, $3.5 million seed round into a company called Learn In. So Learn In kind of shows the other side of the spectrum of what we invest in. So Learn In is actually helping enterprises better support their workforce, their existing workforce. So one of the themes that you'll hear about in Future of Work is that the pace of change in technology is going so quickly that jobs are changing really rapidly. There's a stat that this is pre-COVID, but by 2030, a third of people in the US workforce have to change jobs. Again, obviously there's a lot of disruption in that right now based on changes from the pandemic. But the whole notion is that enterprises are going to take on a new role in this kind of environment. They can't rely on traditional education systems to have a workforce that's prepared for the changes that are happening so rapidly. So enterprises will take on a different role in this. So, sorry, I think you might have a chat, but what that software will do is it will help enterprises eliminate all the barriers to upskilling. That's primarily on time and finances. So if you think about a company investing in someone in their workforce, it actually provides new pathways for folks who might not otherwise have access. So if you think about someone in your current roles, if you guys are working full-time jobs, it would be challenging to take off the time or take time to totally reskill into a new role, like move into data science, for example. So if you think about who might do that outside of work, it tends to have a certain type of profile person. It tends to not be a primary caregiver, underrepresented, et cetera. So what this company is really also getting a lot of focus on is from helping enterprises diversify their leadership by providing those new training routes. The company, just as a quick side, founded by David Blake, who second-time entrepreneur in the space, actually multi-time entrepreneur. He was the founder of Degreed prior, and he's the chairman of that company now. I observed on that board prior. Led the Series C diligence there for Owl. And he came to us, me and Bridget, to think about his next company. We seeded that, we introduced him to the COO, and now we're super active. We're on the board of that company, meet with it regularly. But kind of shows the breadth of the workforce challenges you're thinking about, one all the way from like middle skills, all the way through knowledge workers who are thinking about running, large kind of Fortune 500 companies. Is that helpful in terms of showing the kind of the range? We also have companies that are providing like portable benefits for the workforce. There's another company that's providing financing for different education kind of programs they might pursue, things like that.